Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Allison. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is February the 12th, 1990, and my home group is the Design for Living group in Nashville, Tennessee. We meet on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock. It's a closed discussion meeting. And the last Thursday of the month, we have an open speaker meeting. If you're ever in the Nashville area, we'd love to have you. I'm really glad to be here at State Line. I've heard all these speakers this weekend, and it's just like this tapestry that's being woven this weekend. And I've heard so much information and experience and strength and hope this weekend. And I realized once again just what a blessing Alcoholics Anonymous is in my life. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me and maybe my family. I really want to thank Bob for inviting me to come out here, and everybody that's on the committee or has anything to do with putting this on. We came out here several years ago, 7 years ago, I believe, and had a really good time, and we wanted to come back, so it's good to be back here. I want to thank Dawson for being our host, picking us up there, picking Diane and I up at the airport, and for giving us mass amounts of water where we can stay hydrated in the desert here. And he's just a prince. Thank you so much for making us feel at home. I want to thank the other speakers too. As I said, and Laura mentioned it, she mentioned it several times, of being cracked open. And there's something about this weekend that's just, it's really touching me more than some of the conferences that I get privileged to go to. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear all the speakers. One thing, I don't know about you, but I get information overload from these things. There's so much good information, and there's only so much my little brain can handle. And so I always make sure and get the recordings. And now when I was new, my sponsor would just hand me cassettes and say, listen to this. I don't remember asking him, do you have any speaker talks I can listen to? It was like, listen to this. And I had this Grand Central head all the time, and my brain was just going 100 miles an hour all the time. But I could plug that cassette in the dash of my truck and hear the voice of another alcoholic, and I'd calm down. And I've always listened to speaker talks. I think speaker means the purest form of AA there is, and I've always listened to speaker recordings. But unfortunately, from a lot of the people that I listened to when I first got sober are gone now, and all we have are their recordings. And I really want to thank Lee for being here this weekend. I've got a special appreciation for people that go to these conferences and record these, and not because I'm standing up here, but it's because they're recording our history. And if people like Lee and other folks didn't do that, we wouldn't have those recordings. And so that's a vital service to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I know there's a lot of people think, I just get that free off of YouTube or whatever. But these people go and spend a lot of time and expense recording these things. And I hope you'll support people like Lee in this endeavor to keep these recordings going. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. As I said, I love all the other speakers. One in particular message, when I first came here, I couldn't listen to Al-Anon speakers. I just couldn't. And it's not because I don't like Al-Anon. It's because I'd hear what alcoholism had done to them, and it was too painful to listen to. And unfortunately, I couldn't hear their message of recovery. I just couldn't hear it for a long time, but I can today. And I'm so thankful that there's Al-Anon participation here and other events. And I'm really thankful that people like Larsine and other members of Al-Anon and Alateen kept the doors open for my wife, Diane. She suffered through a lot of alcoholism for a lot of years. And the program of Al-Anon and Alateen have healed our family. And I'm so thankful for Al-Anon and Alateen in my life. And I'm so thankful Diane's here today. Stand up, Diane, where you're out there somewhere. There she is. Oh, she moved back over here in the corner. I thought she moved over here. Oh, you want to be up here close where you can keep an eye on me, right? And I'm really thankful Diane got to come out here with me. She's my lover, my partner in crime, my good friend, travel buddy. I'm just smitten with her. We had a blind date, and I just was smitten with her the first night I went out with her. I'm still chasing her around all these years. And because of AA and Al-Anon, we were married 50 years in August. I'm really thankful you stuck around for the good stuff. I'm supposed to talk about steps 8 and 9 tonight, or this afternoon, which has made a list of all the persons we had harbored and became willing to make amends to them all and made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And when I first came in and I saw the steps on the wall, of course I saw step 4, I didn't want to do that. I saw step 5, I thought I'm not going to do that. And then I saw 8 and 9, I went, man, you want me to do what? But I was so desperate when I came here that I was really willing to do anything. I came here when I was 39 years old, and I was despondent. I was full of despair. I didn't think my life could get any better. I had tried every substance and behavior known that I knew about to try to feel okay, and it had just about killed me. And I was just out of gas. And my friend Cliff G. from Oklahoma City said, if you make it to Alcoholics Anonymous, you might as well stay here because we don't refer you down anywhere else. And I wound up in Alcoholics Anonymous. And but I'd created a lot of havoc up until that point. I started drinking pretty early age. I grew up in a house with 2 parents, and both my parents drank a lot. They started a business about the time I was born, and they worked really hard to try to make this family business work. And then they drank in the evenings to unwind. And then they drink with their friends on the weekends to celebrate. And I thought, that's what you do. You work hard, and then you drink to unwind. But every now and then somebody would drink too much and overshoot the mark. And bad stuff had happened. And I remember thinking, well, they just need to dial it back a little bit. Apparently, if you drink just enough, it works. Well, when I was 14 or 15, I went out with some older boys and got drunk for the first time. And by the way, I was listening to a guy. It's a guy from New York. I heard, a year or 2 ago, and he said he used to say that he drank alcoholically when he was 13. And he said that one time at a meeting, and a guy came up to him after the meeting and said, you don't have to say that. He said, what do you mean? He said, nobody drinks socially when they're 13. So you don't have to say that. So I don't know whether I drank alcoholically or not when I was 14 or 15, but I got drunk, and I got sick, and I had a terrible hangover the next day, and I just realized I don't need to drink gin anymore, apparently, but it worked for me, and as other people have described this weekend. And so I didn't realize that I built alcohol around my life, or my life around alcohol for the next 25 years, but I did. I just tried to drink as much as I could without overshooting the mark. I wanted to drink without consequences. And to start out being a lot of fun, as some people have described, but then it was fun till it wasn't. I was in college, and I met Diane on a blind date. She was at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and I was in Memphis, which is like 400 and something miles apart. But a mutual friend connected us on a blind date when I was in Nashville, and we went out and had a great time. And so I just fell in love with this girl, but I'm still in my last year of college, which I'm about to drop out of college because I don't finish anything. I just have a lot of potential. And so Diane drops out of college, and we moved back to Nashville. And we dated for about a year and a half, and then we just didn't get along. I wasn't the best boyfriend in the world, but I thought she was managing me a little bit too much. I really thought she was going to help me to death sometimes. And I didn't have any communication skills with people, and so I just broke up the relationship one time. I just said, we're done. And I wouldn't tell her why. So she went on with her life. And I dropped out of school and got to work for this family business where I stayed for 33 years till I retired from it. And I'm trying to be this businessman, and I'm working hard, and I'm starting to be successful at it. But I break up with Diane, and about a year goes by, and I had to get my wisdom teeth out. And, they give you a whole bunch of drugs to do that. And they told me I needed somebody to go to this oral surgeon with me, so I got my office manager to go take me over there, and they hooked me up to this IV and put this stuff in my arm, and they could have pulled my whole jaw out. I wouldn't have cared. And so the guy leads me back over to my apartment, and he said, look, I got to get back to the office. He said, you're a mess. He said, who can I call to, take care of you for a couple of hours before this stuff wears off? And I'm just loaded on these drugs, and so I just start writing on a piece of paper, call Diane, and wrote her work number down. Now, this guy knew I dated Diane, but he had no idea I'd been broken up with her for over a year. And he just calls her up and said, hey, Diane, this is George. Mike's had his wisdom teeth out. He wants you to come over and take care of him. And she's thinking, George who? Mike who? I mean, she had another guy living with her at this time, which was a problem. And she hadn't been to Al-Anon yet. And she came over on her lunch break. And I'm just loaded. I'm writing down, I love you. I want you back. Move in with me. You know how we are. And she did 2 days later. We've been together ever since. That was March 18th of 1975. And every March 18th we celebrate Tooth Day. So we get back together, and a couple months later, I'm indulging in some non-conference dry goods. And I just looked at her out of the blue, and I said, let's get married. And she was shocked. And I kind of was, too. I really didn't mean to do it, but apparently God wanted me to ask her to marry me. And so we got married a couple months later, and we're off and started this relationship together. And at this time, sure, she says in her Al-Anon talks there were some red flags, but I'm still thinking I got my drinking under control, but I don't, and it starts getting worse. And in my mid-30s, I started doing some really crazy stuff. One of them, the first thing was my dad got an opportunity to leave this business that I was in with him and be gone for several years, and so I took his place for 4 years. And so I'm trying to run this business best I can. I'm young and doing the best I can. So I'm getting crazy, and I'm going to my doctor because I've got all this anxiety about this job, and he gives me some tranquilizers, and then I start having these migraine headaches, and he gives me some pain pills, and then I get this crushing depression, so he gives me some antidepressants, and so I'm taking these tranquilizers and antidepressants and pain pills and all the street drugs I'm taking and washing it down with Crown Royal, trying to power through life and be somebody. And I started doing some nutty stuff. We bought a house that we still live in. It's way up on top of a really high hill in Nashville, and it's a long dead-end street. And most of our neighbors don't have any landscaping or anything. They just have their houses in the woods. But I was in the landscaping business, and I wanted to show off what a big shot I was. So I'm trying to grow grass in front of my house and have all these shrubs and bushes and all the flowers and all this stuff. And I had all these trees in my yard, too, like all my other neighbors. And, the leaves would shade out all my grass and kill it in the summertime. And then we'd have like millions of leaves fall, and I'd have to clean all these leaves up. So one day I just decided, I thought, I'll just cut all my trees down. And that probably they'd been okay, and I thought they were my trees. But I really wasn't exactly sure where my property line was on one side of it. I knew where our property line is marked by power poles on the street, so I knew where my lot line was at the street. But our lot goes way down this steep hill. I mean, I've lived there since 1976. I've only been down there maybe 2 or 3 times. I mean, it's straight up and down. But I got my plat where I bought my house and a compass, and I go wandering down this hillside because I'm going to find my property line. And I find this old rusted out fence post in the hillside, and I was just sure that was my property line. But I couldn't even see my house from where I found it. So I hiked back up the hill, and I called this friend of mine that was a surveyor, and these guys came over there, and I took them all the way down that hillside and showed them that fence post. And these guys told me a couple of times, they said, we don't think this is right. But I'm an alcoholic. I mean, I know everything, and I've got this laser beam focus, And if I'm paying you, you're going to do it my way anyway. So I tell them, I said, no, man, I'm sure that's my line. So these guys said, okay. So they marked this line I told them to mark. And when they got through with their surveying, the stakes and flags that they put in the ground were almost touching my next door neighbor's house. And it's quite a ways away. Now, a sane person would have thought, well, maybe these surveyors are right, you know. I've since found out, since I got sober, if you want a property line found, you just call up a surveyor. They'll come find the line for you. You don't have to tell them where you think it is. Well, not me. I know everything. And so when they get through and these stakes and flags are almost touching the house, instead of thinking, well, maybe I'm wrong, it's like, well, that old goat, he's been using my property all these years. You know, he built his house up here a long time ago before we got here, and he's using my land, and I feel violated. And I don't have any communication skills with people. I mean, I'm sure I'm right. I want to be right. And I was certain I was right. And I wasn't going to wait till he got back from Florida, where he was with his wife, to discuss this with him. I just know I'm right, and I want these trees cut down. So I call up another friend of mine that had a tree surgery company, and they send 2 of these great big bucket trucks up there, and all these guys with chainsaws, and they cut all these trees down between our houses. And it was a lot of trees. According to a jury of my peers, it was $50,000 worth of trees in 1984. Because when my neighbor got home, he wasn't happy with my surveying. And he sued me. And he should have. And he did. And he was so upset that he asked for a jury trial, which was kind of unusual in a civil case. And I had to sit through a 2-day jury trial for cutting this man's trees down. And I remember dressed up in a 3-piece suit. I had this vest and a gold chain and a pocket watch, and I go strutting in the courtroom like I'm some dignified businessman that's been falsely accused. And I'd sweated all the way through the suit. You know that old vodka sweat smell? And I was chomping down these blue volumes in the bathroom of the courthouse during the recesses to try to act calm, while his attorney just portrayed me as a lunatic for doing this. And after the 2-day trial, the jury awarded him the $50,000, and they added $5,000 more punitive damages to it that he didn't even ask for. Now, if you're new here this afternoon, I'm trying to describe what a resentment is, because I hate this guy. I think he's overreacting. I never took responsibility for anything I did. I'd make it your fault. I could do that without fault. And if you asked me a question about something, I'd give you an answer based on what I thought you wanted to hear rather than the truth without fault. And that's the way I was living my life. Well, after this man sues me, man, I just burned with this resentment, and I thought, I'm going to get even with this guy. And I spent years just being a bad person for this man. My story is about forgiveness and redemption. I'm here today to tell you about how the 9th step straightened all that out. And there's no way I could have straightened that out. But I didn't have any skills when I did this. I was just that tornado roaring through the lives of others. When I'd see this man on the street, I'd ease my car over in his lane like I was playing chicken with him. I'd curse at him when he got his mail. Diane didn't have any recovery at the time. We had 2 young sons at the time. She was really good friends with this elderly couple that lived next door. They were wonderful people. They were like grandparents to our kids. But after I did that, Diane sided with me. She thought she was supposed to do that, you know, that old stand by your man thing. And so she and my kids never went over there. You know, I made the mistake of saying early on, oh, I didn't hurt anybody but myself, but I did. I harmed everybody that was around me. I denied that relationship for a lot of years. So I'm building that wreckage. My dad comes back and wants his job back in the business after his commitment was through. And I just said, no, you need to retire now. I got this. And he drank like I did, so he and I got in this horrific clash. And he'd come out to my office every day and want to help me, which meant I thought he was coming out there to tell me what to do. I brought my shotgun to work one day And I was going to shoot the windows and tires out of his Buick to show him I didn't want him there. That's how I communicated with people. But I was afraid of my dad. And he asked me, he said, "What's your shotgun doing there?" And I didn't say anything. Well, I didn't do it, and I went home and I told Diane what I'd done, and she'd been trying to fix me for all those years, and she finally just threw in the towel and said, "I don't know what to do, go see somebody." And by this time, when I'm 39, all of a sudden my alcoholism just went to the dark side. I know it had been doing that a long time. Diane says in her Al-Anon talk, she never knew who was coming home, Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde. But anyhow, I started doing things that I don't like to talk about today. And one of the things that I've heard a lot this weekend of people talking about how it used to be and the damage and the wreckage they caused. And I'm up here to talk about how the 8th and 9th step have straightened that out. And that straightens it out the best I can. But there's some ways I live my life I really wish I hadn't done to this day. I still feel badly about it. I try not to dwell on it because that goes into self-pity. But just because I've done steps 8 and 9 doesn't mean that the slate's clean. And I've got a taste of that to listen to other people's experience today. But alcoholism took me to the dark side, and I don't like talking about this, but I started cheating on my wife. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but I was doing it anyway. That's just where alcoholism took me. And I'm just wanting to die because I can't go on living like I'm living, but I can't stop living like I'm living. Well, through a series of things of going to see my doctor, who sent me to a psychologist, who sent me to another trained professional with Diane and I wound up going to an outpatient treatment program because I told him I couldn't go into an inpatient program. I had to work. And the guy said, "Well, if you don't do something about your alcoholism, you're not going to have a business or a job. You're going to die." But I go to this outpatient treatment program, and it's the first thing I've ever finished in my life. And I had to get a sponsor before I got out of treatment, and so I had to go to 5 meetings a week. And I thought, "Man, you mean 5 meetings?" And they said, "No, we mean 5 meetings a week." And I said, "I'm too busy to do that. I can't do that." Well, I'm standing up here. I got a 35-year medallion in my pocket that I got back in February that I really like. But I still don't want to get too many years and not enough days. I got to participate in my own recovery. I'm a lot safer and I feel a whole lot more comfortable. I'm a better human being if I build my life around AA instead of AA around my life when it's convenient. So I still go to about 5 meetings a week. But I go to this full moon group, and I get this sponsor named Buff, who I thought must be president of AA because he said good things, and he gave me his phone number the first night. And he told me a couple things. He said, "Look, I'm going to be bone-crushing honest with you, and I want you to be bone-crushing honest with me." And then he told me something that's the best news anybody's ever told me. He said, if you'll take the 12 steps with me like I took them with John Bradford, your life will change whether you want it to or not. And I see that over and over again. I see the people that take the steps in order with a sponsor that have already taken the steps, and their life gets significantly better. And I've been blessed with examples of that to watch, to see that happen. Now, having that knowledge, I wanted to say that I got busy and took all 12 steps, and that my life got wonderful. But as we read in how it works, it says that some of these we balked. I balked at every one of the steps. When I get to feeling a little better, I'm going to stop until it gets so painful that I'm going to drink again, blow my brains out, or take the next step. I begrudgingly I was talking to my sponsor on a regular basis. He had me praying on my knees to this God that I was sure had abandoned me or didn't want anything to do with me or was going to fry me for all the things I'd done. But I just did what he said, and I asked God to direct my day. And at night, I thank God for keeping me clean and sober and faithful to my wife that day. And I'm going to meetings, and I liked AA from the time I came in. So I'm going to meetings, and it's an hour a day that I'm not crazy. And I'm learning the lingo of the room. And I'm praying every day. And I don't like the third step prayer, so I retyped it in modern English. It didn't have the these and thous in it. And I'm saying the third step prayer and going to the meetings, and I'm feeling great. And so I stop. And Buff keeps telling me I got to do these other steps. Nope, I'm good. And I say this because Steve's here today. And I happen to be sitting right next to Steve's first sponsor one night in my home group, Frank. And I was Mr. Wonderful in the meeting, and I said, man, my life is so good, I think the promises are coming true for me, and I'm only on the third step. And Frank was sitting right next to me, and he leaned over to me and he said, you're doing the alcoholic waltz. I said, what's that, Frank? He said, 1, 2, 3, drunk. 1, 2, 3, drunk. I thought, you old goat, you got sober during the Civil War. I've been to treatment. I'm an up-to-date alcoholic. And they just let me go. Now, in spite of thinking I was following my sponsor's directions, which I was doing the best I could, I suppose, I started reading in the book, like you're supposed to read the book. And I started reading in there that we made amends to people. And we shared in a general way. And we were rigorously honest. And I had so much guilt and shame and remorse from being unfaithful to my wife that I decided I need to make amends to her. And I didn't say a word to Buff about it. And I really thought I was doing the right thing. I really did. And I got Diane in a conversation, and I told her in a general way that I'd been unfaithful to her and that I was going to be the husband and father she deserved. And it didn't go well. And I called my sponsor and I told him what I'd done. And he just went thermonuclear. I try to keep my language clean up here. I know I'm a representative of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't know who all's in this room. So I'm going to paraphrase what he told me, because I can't tell you the words he said. But he said, that's why they number the steps for smart college boys like you. He said, what are you doing trying to make amends to her? You hadn't even done a 4-step yet. And he said, and by the way, Hoss, all you did was dump your guilt. And when he said that, it was like somebody stuck a knife in my chest. And that's when I became teachable, when I tried to make that 9-step amends without doing the rest of the steps. Diane had every right to leave me right there, and she didn't. And sadly, she said it was out of fear. It was out of fear. But that's when I got teachable, and that's when I did that 4-step. I wrote that resentment list and that fears list and that sex inventory. And after I did that, I shared a 5th step with my sponsor who showed me in the book that the people that kept secrets invariably got drunk. And so I did that. I told him stuff I never thought I'd tell another human being. And he told me that his deepest, darkest secrets to make me comfortable enough to do that. So I'm going through this process, and I get to step 6 and 7 that Laura talked about earlier. And I thought, boy, that's great, man. 6 and 7, they're a paragraph each, 2 steps and two paragraphs in 5 minutes. Boom, boom. And I paid lip service to that. All I did, I thought, well, I know how I've loused up my life by writing this inventory. I know how to live my life now. I'm just not going to be that guy anymore. And I spent the next 3 or 4 months. He's trying to get me to make this 8-step amends list to keep going, but I stopped again because I'm thinking I know how I've loused up my life. I'm not going to be that guy. And for the next 3 or 4 months, I'm the same sarcastic, explosive, depressive knucklehead that I always was, except I knew why. And knowing why you're a mess it's the information, but it ain't good after a while. And that's when I realized if I don't have a power greater than me to help me with this, I'm in a lot of trouble. And we're down at Diane's parents' home that they had down in the Florida Keys for Christmas. And this is dead sober now, I cussed out my father-in-law on his boat. I'd been staying at his house and eating his food for a week, but I cussed him out on his boat for something I don't know what about. And I yelled at both my sons, and I was just miserable. I'd made everybody mad in the house at Christmas time. And I called my sponsor, and I said, man, I just cussed out my father-in-law and yelled at my kids. And he said, what's the temperature down there? And I said, it's about 80. He said, well, it's 13 here in Nashville, I want you to know. But he said, congratulations, Hoss. You've been trying to remove your own character defects. He said, why don't you get on your knees and say the 7-step prayer like you mean it, and let's get busy on these amends. And I did it out of desperation. And so it says we made a list of all the persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So I wrote that list because I was desperate. Every time I get desperate, when I run out of ideas, it works so much better when I'm out of ideas. So I wrote this list of people, and I put my father, my next door neighbor, my wife, lots of folks. And I wrote down the harm. He said, well, write in the second column, write down what you did to them. And so I wrote the harm that I caused them all. And then I just gave them to my sponsor. I said, please help me with this. Because the first amends I tried to make to Diane went terribly wrong. And I was willing to do whatever my sponsor told me to do. And that's when I realized the value of a sponsor. I heard Peggy Martin say one time, I can sponsor people. It's like I can shine a flashlight for somebody in the dark, but I can't shine it for me. And so I just turned that over to my sponsor. He's a guy that's, because I'd gone through the steps with him, he understood me. He's an unemotional third party to my chaos. And I trusted him to help me to straighten that out. And he did the best he could at the time. And I want to tell you about some of those amends. And the first one I want to talk about is to my wife, because I just love this woman dearly. I'm so glad she stayed with me. She told me one time, of all the alcoholics and drug addicts she's ever dated, she likes me best. But he had me write her a letter. And he told me what to put in the letter and what not to put in the letter. So I wrote it exactly like he told me, and I handed it to her. And she read the letter and tore it up right in front of me. And I went back to Buff. I said, hey, man, that didn't work. What do we do? And he showed me in the book where he thought that was appropriate at the time. Now, I wish things had been done differently back then, but they weren't. And I did what he said, and that was his best thinking. It was a lot better than my best thinking. But I started hearing people talk about living amends, and so I thought, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I asked God every day to help me be the best husband and father I can be today. And so she didn't leave me again, and we got along pretty good after that. And I thought that everything was good. But about 5.5 years later, we had to go to a family counselor for some stuff going on. And we were in that family counselor's office 5 minutes, and my infidelity came up, and I got some information from her about what she wanted for an amends. Because she hadn't got an amends yet for 5.5 years. And I found out what she wanted for an amends, and I took it back to my sponsor. And I said, this is what Diane wants for an amends. And he said, well, how do you feel about that? I said, that will never work. I know she'll leave me. There's no way that'll work. I have a bad case of contempt prior to investigation, by the way. I said, that'll never work. And he said, well, can you stay sober if she does? And I didn't want to hear that, y'all. I was trying my best to make this marriage work, and I was afraid I was going to lose my marriage. And so for the next 2 days, I prayed about having the courage to make that amends to her. I even talked to a couple of people that were in the program that said, hey, man, I don't know whether I'd do that or not. And it put doubt in my mind. But I knew I came to the realization that even though I have no right to cause further harm by making amends to people, I got to make amends to people the way they want it, not the way I want it. And so I prayed for the courage to do that. And I went in that counselor's office a couple of days later with Diane. And I said, look, I don't think this will work, but if this is what you want for an amends, this is what I'm willing to do. I love you, and this is what I'm willing to do. And I made that amends to her, and I just knew, boom, it was going to be over. That was 30 years ago, 2 weeks ago. I got a marriage today that's built on honesty and trust. I know there's still some scars there. But I started by making that amends to her, gave me a foundation to build a relationship with this woman that I love so much. It's the first time I've ever had a real partnership with another human being. I'm so thankful she stayed that long to do that. But if I hadn't made that amends, I wouldn't be standing here today. And I know a lot of people think, well, I'm not waiting 5.5 years to make an amends. I'm telling you, the guy standing here is grateful for it. I wouldn't trade my relationship with Diane with anybody's. And I work real hard trying to keep that slate clean today. I want to tell you briefly about my dad. When my mom died, I was still drunk. And all I could do was just stay in the funeral home with a half gallon of Crown Royal and just numb my way through it. And after my mom died, my dad was not doing too well. And eventually we had to take his car keys away from him. And both my sisters lived out of town, and I was the one that had to take his keys away from him. And sometimes I think when I do the right thing, I'm supposed to feel warm and fuzzy every time, and sometimes I feel terrible. And when I took my dad's car keys away, it was like I took his whole life away. So I had to drive him around. Well, I realized through that resentment that in this 4 step that, he had given me all kinds of opportunities. He loved me in ways that I never could think of. He sent me to this private boys' school that was exclusive in Nashville. I got kicked out of it when I was a freshman. He sent me off to school to learn something, to be in this family business. He gave me the opportunity to be in this business I stayed in for 33 years. And all I did was want him out of my life. So I wrote him a letter thanking him and admitting my faults. And Buff Test said, get him in a lucid moment where you can give it to him. And I gave him this letter, and we hugged and cried, and we got along pretty good for a while. But the problem was, after a while, I almost felt like he took that and was going to use it against me because we didn't get along again. And I had to drive him everywhere, and he was really hard to get along with, and we got in these terrible arguments. And I went to Buff. I said, look, I made amends to this guy, and now it's like he's turned on me again. I don't know what to do about it. And he said, Michael, you need to go do some more inventory. And so I had to go back and do another 4-step on my dad. And what I found out was he was a guy that had some wealth and power and some prestige. And even though I was 40 years old at this time and been making my own living for a long time, he was still my higher power. I put that guy on a pedestal to get me out of trouble when I was in trouble. I thought if all else fails, he'd bail me out. And the other thing is he was a guy who had some wealth. And I didn't want to make him mad or he might cut me out of his will. It was my greed. And I told Buff, I said, man, it's my greed that I can't get along with this man. And he said, oh, that's great. He said, well, I want you to just get on your knees for the next 3 weeks every night and every morning and pray that when he dies, he leaves everything to your sisters. And I thought, you're nuts, but I was in such pain that I did that, and I got free of that. Now, about a year later, my dad died. And as a sober member of AA, I was able to participate in his funeral and be there for his family, our family, and his friends. And I was able to take care of the estate, and everybody got what they were supposed to get. I'm the black sheep of the family, and here I am handling the estate for my dad, for my sisters, and myself. Well, I want to tell you about my next-door neighbor. Buff said when you go make amends, he said, look, he said, you need to go apologize to this man. He said, don't go tell him you're sorry. He knows what a sorry son of a gun you are. He said, but you need to go apologize to him. And one other thing I did. Before I cut his trees down and he sued me, I was in the landscaping business, and he came to me one time and he wanted me to get him a weeping cherry tree for his yard. He said, can you get one of those for me? My wife thinks that's the prettiest tree there is. I said, yeah, I can do that. What else you want? And he said, I don't know. I said, well, ask her if she wants some other shrubs. And so he came back, and he thought I was trying to sell him something, but I was just trying to be the big shot. And so I sent one of my crews out and got this big weeping cherry tree and these other plants and planted them in his yard, and he came over and he wanted to pay me. And I said, no, you don't owe me anything. And it's like, look at me. I'm a big shot. I don't need your money. I got these people that work for me, and I can just do these things for people. That's what I do. And I wasn't doing it for fun and for free. It was just, look at me, what a big shot I am. So I wouldn't let him pay me for this weeping cherry tree and these other plants. So after he sued me the next night, I went over there with some herbicide and put it on the weeping cherry tree and that stuff and killed it. Not many Al-Anons here, Larsine. Alcoholics all laugh. Al-Anons go, oh. So at any rate, that's how I was treating my next door neighbor, right? So Buff said, you need to go apologize to him, and you need to go plant him another weeping cherry tree. He said, now you don't need to tell him how it died. That wouldn't add anything to his life. And so, and I don't know about you people, but when I find out that I've got an amend to make, these people just show up. And so I'm coming back from the backroom group a couple of days later on a Sunday morning, and I pull in my driveway. And as I pull in my driveway, I look over there, and I see him over there on his riding lawnmower. He didn't own a lawnmower before I cut his trees down. But he's over there on his riding lawnmower. And my heart starts pounding, and I stop my car at the foot of the driveway. And I just said, God, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. But please give me the right words to say and show me how to do this. And I got out of my car, and I walked around the 6-foot-high wood fence that I'd put up after he sued me to try to screen him out. And I start walking toward this man, and he sees me coming. And his eyes get really big, and he has this fear in his eyes. Like, can I get this lawnmower in a high enough gear to outrun this guy? Do I abandon ship and run? I mean, he's afraid of me. He's afraid of me. But he turns the lawnmower off, and he gets off of it, and he comes over to me. And I said, Mr. Logan, can I talk to you for a minute? And he said, sure, what is it? I said, I did a terrible thing cutting your trees down. And I've disrespected you and your wife for a long time. And all that was wrong. I'm trying to change some things in my life. And I don't know what I can ever do to make up for the damage I caused you, but if there's anything I can do to make up for that, I'm willing to do whatever it is. Now, I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to say I'll do whatever. I didn't mean to say that. But I asked God to direct what came out of my mouth, and that's what I said. And I thought the man would just say, get off my property. Don't you ever come near me again, because that's how I dealt with people. I burned a bridge with people when they got in my way. And I thought that's what he would do, and I could go just leave and call Buff and say, okay, man, this is done. The guy told me to get off his property. You can mark this off the list. I had no idea what making amends was like. And the man came over to me and he put his arms around me and he hugged me. He started sobbing on my shoulder. This man was over 80 years old at the time. And he held me for a while he's sobbing on my shoulder. And then he pulled back away from me and he looked me right dead in the eye and he said, what's in the past is over. This man just forgave me right there. And my mind says, okay, he's forgiven you, run. I mean, I want to run away, man. But I had that voice in my head from my sponsor saying, don't you run away from here. You got something to do here. And if I hadn't had clear instructions from my sponsor about what to do right then, I'd have missed what I'm going to tell you now. I'd have missed it. I'd have run away and I'd have missed it. But I could hear him say, don't you go anywhere. And I said, look, I appreciate you forgiving me, but I really want to do something to make up for this. And he looked at me again and he said, you already have by coming over here. The thing that hurt my wife and I the most all these years is that we'd lost our neighbor. And we've been praying every day that we'd get our neighbor back, and now our prayers have been answered. Now, I've been pulling my driveway cussing him every day, and he'd been praying for me. My sponsor told me after he'd heard me tell this story a couple of times, he said, if you ever get to where your higher power's not big enough, why don't you just borrow Mr. Logan's for a while? I'm sorry I get so emotional telling you all this. I want you to know I've told this story a lot of times. I never get tired of telling it because I feel like I'm standing in that man's yard right now. Making that amends that day has been a life-changing event for me. So I said, look, I really want to make something. I want to. Can I plant you this weeping cherry tree? He said, well, I want to plant you a weeping cherry tree. He said, you don't have to do that. And I said, I'd like to if you'll let me. And he said, well, Mr. Logan would like it. So I didn't have my people anymore. And I got this big weeping cherry tree. And my son, who's now 47, was 13 at the time, was 12 at the time. He doesn't remember doing this. And we planted this weeping cherry tree in this man's yard. And he wrote me a letter that I carry in my big book. And this is dated June 26, 1991. Dear Mike, it was with much surprise that we found a beautiful cherry tree in our yard when we returned home yesterday. We had not expected it so soon. We appreciate it so very much, and we will care for it and we will cherish it always, not only for its own sake, for it is a beautiful tree, but because it symbolizes a deep and lasting friendship between us and you and your family. We pray that God will bless you and your family in all that you do. And we pray for ourselves, for we are a sinful people by nature. There are none of us without fault, and we need His constant love and forgiveness. Again, we thank you for the tree. We're all the more grateful because you did not have to do it. Your friendship means more to us than you know. Most sincerely, George Logan. After I made that amends, this man sent us a country ham for Christmas every year, or a box of Omaha steaks every year for Christmas until he died. My dad died about a year later, and the first flowers that came to the funeral home was a wreath of purple orchids from Mr. Logan, and I've got one of them on my desk. He died about 6 years later. And since I got sober, you taught me to show up for weddings and funerals and graduations, things that I used to not show up for. And I get to do that these days. And I go to this man's funeral, and it was at a big Baptist church in my neighborhood, and I dress up, I go over there, and I mean, the place is full. It's a big church. And I go in there, and I don't know anybody there. But I'm shaking hands with people in there. And I'm going through the receiving line shaking hands, and I don't know a soul there, and I shake hands with this one man, and he says, oh, you're Mr. Allison. Dad told us all about you. I'm going, oh, great. Why did I come here? But this man looked at me and he said that you'd had a disagreement, but that you'd made it right. And you see, if I hadn't been desperate enough to do what my sponsor told me and make that amends, I'd have never made that amends, and it wouldn't have made that right. The promises started coming true for me after that. I started knowing a new freedom and a new happiness, just like it says. And when I see people take the steps and they get to the ninth step, I see their lives change, and I watch people go through that. That doesn't mean it's over with. I've still had things come up that I have to make amends for. I was talking to my sponsor this morning, Jay, and Jay said, you know, when I was 40 years sober, I made 2 amends that had just come around that he had to make. So it's an ongoing process. One thing I'm about to run out of time here. A couple things I've been wrong about, I just realized just here lately. I thought the grace of God entered my life when I got sober, because it was a great time that I wasn't looking for. But I've been wrong about that. The grace of God's always been there. There's been this light shining all the time. I was just walking in that darkness for so long, but the light was shining on me, and all I had to do is just look up and follow that light. And for me, following the light is doing AA. And my job today is to embrace the grace and keep following that light and stay out of the darkness. And the other thing is when I made those amends, I thought, you know, my whole life was just this, it was like a dumpster fire. And I had all these dumpster fires going that I wanted to put out. I wanted to make amends out of guilt or whatever it was, just to want to make it right. And so I made all these amends and checking them off these amends lists. And I thought, okay, I fixed that. What I didn't know is those amends that I made, some of them 30-something years ago, are still paying me dividends today. Now, that doesn't mean I rest on my laurels and say, look what I did that long ago. But it tells me if I keep living this program, it keeps multiplying. It's like when I first came here, my whole life was just a patch of weeds, man. And when you're a patch of weeds, all you do is just grow more weeds, and it reseeds more weeds. But the 12 steps, particularly the amends, where I got to take my recovery back into the world with other people, invite my recovery in with other people. All of a sudden, it cut all those weeds down, and I planted some new seeds by making those amends. And when those crops started coming up, they were really good, and there weren't many weeds in there. And I can pluck those out every now and then in a 10th step. But when you're growing a good crop, man, it reseeds and you get more crop. So I know that there's more out there for me to do, but I had no idea when I made those amends that it was to still pay me dividends down the road, and that's the good news I want to share with you today. I want to close with something. This is out of the Daily Reflections, December the 2nd. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and that's from the 12 and 12, page 106. And the comment was, as I continued to go to meetings and work the steps, something began to happen to me. I felt confused because I wasn't sure what I was feeling. And then I realized I was experiencing serenity. It was a good feeling, but where did it come from? Then I realized it had come as a result of these steps. The program may not always be easy to practice, but I had to acknowledge my serenity had come to me after working the steps. As I work the steps in everything I do, practicing these principles in all my affairs, now I find that I'm awake to God, to others, and to myself. The spiritual awakening I've enjoyed as a result of working the steps is the awareness that I'm no longer alone. And I'm no longer alone. Right here, right now. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love God. I love all of you. And I really do love this good life. Thank you so much for letting me be here. Whew.